I'm assuming this is why we're all here. You're not here to look at my pretty face. You're not here to look at John's pretty face or give Pat your money. Captain Weston Hartman is here to talk to us tonight. He's going to hit you guys with a lot of knowledge tonight, and I'm telling you guys, a lot of really cool screenshots and a lot of cool videos. So Weston Hartman, take it away, and he told me, this is what you told me the other day, he wants questions along the way, at the end. So he wants this to be very interactive. So if something pops up here, you don't understand it, you want to ask a question about it, just raise your hand or holler at him, whatever. He does want to make this as interactive as possible and as fun and informational for everybody. So Captain Weston Hartman, everyone.
All right.
Yeah, like Chad said, I'd love to have questions. If you're not curious about it, then obviously it wouldn't be useful to you. I'm going to go over a lot of...
Everybody okay with the temperature? I've got the door cracked. Is it too cold? Is it too hot?
It's good.
All right.
I'm going to show a lot of 2D sonar shots. I'm going to go over all different types of sonar, from 2D, down imaging, side imaging, live scope, which is the new technology from Garmin, which is amazing if you haven't seen it, and that's one big thing that I want to give off is Garmin live scope. If anything, I want you to go home knowing how effective it is. So yeah, questions, any questions come up anytime, just raise your hand, I'll get to you, and then at the end, there'll be time for questions as well. So I'll get right into it here. I've fished Smith Mountain Lake for 6-7 years. I started pretty young, kind of like a needle in a haystack in this room a little bit. It seems like striper fishing is like a midlife crisis type deal. I don't know where that comes from.
Damn young kids.
But as a kid, I never went to a Friday night football game because that was a missed opportunity to go fishing. So, but I'll get right into this here. Got a little quicker. So I was introduced to fishing at a very young age. I've been very passionate about fishing ever since. This was me at 6 years old. Ever since I was a kid, I've been very passionate about fishing. This is my grandfather right here. This was in the Outer Banks, so that's not a Smith Mountain Lake stud right there.
Really?
Fish.
What's the weight?
I have no idea. Probably,
Biggest him.
yeah, I mean that's probably a 40, 50 pound fish right there. So I'm 21 years old. Fishing, as I said, is my passion, my life. What I've always gotten into. 2 years ago is when I started. I've been guiding for fished Smith Mountain Lake. Like I said, 6-7 years. 2 years ago is when I started full time. I gave it my all. Grew up in Roanoke. Went to Northside High School in Roanoke. Everybody's familiar with Northside? Any alum? Any Northside alum? Northside alum, right there. Go, Mike. Okay, yeah. Not a great school anymore, but. This is me a few years ago. This is when I started. That was my first boat. I got a laser here. That's a bass tracker. That's what I started out as. I got the cheapest thing I could. Actually, I did start with a John boat, but I've had a lot of boats now from when I started to where I am now. But these are a few of my fish when I first got started a few years ago. By 15, I was head over heels for them. It was completely by accident. I, like a lot of kids nowadays, was very into bass fishing. And the striper that I caught that one night that I got into, it was completely by accident, and I never looked back. And that's one thing I tell a lot of my clients. It's a story I love to tell. Is the one night that happened completely changed my life. There's my bass tracker purchase right there. Getting started, I kind of talked about this a little bit. Getting started at 15 years old is intimidating, especially when you're on a 16-foot bass tracker. And, you know, Todd Keith now has, what, a 30-foot center console, and he's out there, and that's intimidating. I got intimidated by, you know, no one my age being in this sport as well. And so I kind of had to teach myself a lot of this, which I think leads to a better knowledge in the end, teaching yourself. And first-hand experience is everything. I'll talk about that a little bit, too. I just got into that. Growing, when I first started fishing Smith Mountain Lake, has anybody heard of the Smith Mountain Lake fishing forums? Anybody on there? That is a huge resource. Has archives from posts for I think 10 years now. You can go back and look 10 years ago what somebody did in December, January, any month of the year. And I use the fishing forums helped me a lot. That was my biggest resource getting into striper fishing was the fishing forum. I was completely lost getting into this. I knew absolutely nothing coming in as a 15-year-old kid, and a lot of the information I got was from the fishing forums. Here, there's In the fall of 2019, so this was the year of the pandemic. It was spring 2020 when the pandemic hit. I went to college at Roanoke College, graduated from Northside in 2019 and went to college at Roanoke College. I was majoring in business, minoring in striper fishing. And like I said, the spring of 2020, COVID-19 pandemic hit, and that's really what sent me here. That's my story, is the COVID-19 pandemic is really why I'm here. It sent us home and made me realize that what I was in college for was not what I wanted to do. So we can watch a video. This is one of my, you guys want to watch this?
Yeah.
This was a news story that I'm in. I think they explain a little bit. Show this briefly.
Hey, Weston.
Yeah.
Can you sit there or talk from there?
Yeah.
That's good.
My favorite man at the top there.
Yeah, join the club.
Sound on? There you go.
Got a bad connection. Okay.
Everyone.
But Will Stafford found a young man who took a bad situation and reeled in success.
Weston Hartman grew up loving the waters of Smith Mountain Lake.
My grandfather got me into fishing and has taught me a lot. That's all my grandfather. My love of fishing was inspired by him.
The Northside High School graduate used to go to the lake and fish for fun, but never thought about making it a career, at least not until 2020. In his second semester of college, the pandemic forced him to come home.
That made me realize that I did not want to do what I was in college for. And so I spent some time thinking about what I wanted to do.
That's when he decided that he would make his hobby his job and become a full-time fishing charter boat captain.
I took a leap of faith and bought this boat, and now in a year of running Hartman Guide Services.
His boat, the Smith Mountain Lake Days, is decked out with the newest technology, but it's his lifelong experience navigating these waters that makes the real difference.
It's all experience. You can read as many books as you want. You can go to as many websites as you want. Experience is all that matters out here.
Hartman is only 21 years old.
We asked him, man. I said, you even buy a pack of smokes, man, and drink a beer or something.
So you're the captain? They say that every single morning.
But don't let that fool you. The customers we talked to today, Hartman is as seasoned as anyone when it comes to finding fish.
Put us right on the spot. He told us he was going to come. You know, we had him baited out, waiting around. And then just like he said, just a whole school of fish kind of came at one time.
The catch that they returned to shore with proves Hartman knows fish. His day starts just after 2 in the morning, getting bait ready for the day's fishing trips. But Hartman says he couldn't have snagged a better career.
I went from fishing every day to taking people fishing every day. That's the only difference.
Weston Hartman does charters all year round. For more information on how you can book Weston to charter your next fishing trip, we put links and contact information on our ABC 13 app. On Smith Mountain Lake, Will Stafford, ABC 13 News.
You're saying on my first bet the season.
Nice.
All right. I'll keep going. Let's see.
Weston, how about if you stand right here? That's,
You mean to stand over here?
yeah, that's real good. Then I get the screen is straight.
Okay. All right, so that's my current boat right now. That's a 25-foot Sea Fox there. It's black and white now. It's not blue anymore. It said My Girls on it. It was wrapped. It said My Girls on the side when I first bought it. So the first thing I did was take that off. But it's black and white now. You've probably seen me out before. In January is when I took my captain's course. If anybody has questions about the captain's course as well, I can talk about that later as well. If anybody wants to come up to me and ask questions about that. In February of 2020, I purchased my boat. Can you guys still see? You guys good?
Might as well, but
Can you stand? Yeah. All right, so in March 2020 is my first guided trip. I took off. I think the following picture is from my first ever trip. This was in March of 2020. There are the Gills Creek Islands there in the background. You guys familiar with that area right there? One of the biggest things that I say to my clients talk to me a lot about this, is I never would have started guiding if I knew then, when I started, what I know now. And the amount of knowledge that I acquired, it would have been too intimidating for me to start. Once you dedicate yourself to a lake full-time, once you say, I'm going to do this every day, I'm going to go out every day, I'm going to see this situation every day, it changes everything completely. Now, I don't fish the same way I did then that I do now. It's completely changed. And mostly in mobility. I think mobility is very underrated in striper fishing. And I think a lot of people aren't mobile enough. They want to stick to a certain area versus chase these fish around. And it's all about chasing these fish around. And that's where sonar really comes into the play. I said that earlier. Here's my first year. Here's a few pictures from my first year.
Not bad.
Walleye coming up here.
There's not many in the lake, is there?
No. This particular walleye was caught in Sailor Cove, just around from Bernard's. It was the only one I had seen with my own eyes. I've heard of it, but I have never seen it. There it is. It was a citation walleye.
Wow.
Bernard's Landing in the background. This was in Sailor's Cove. But that, I thought we had a stick. It didn't fight at all.
No, they don't fight.
No, it was terrible.
I got an 8.5 pounder years ago
Yeah,
at the Gills Creek area.
yeah. I told the guy, I said, you got a stick on you. All right, my first 2 years takeaways, the first point is I'm not a morning person. I'm not as much of a morning person as I thought I was. I've always loved to get up in the morning and fish at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. But then getting up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning to catch bait and have someone yell at you for throwing on their lights, that's always motivating to get out there. Sonar is everything. Here we're going to get into the sonar portion of it. I'm going to show you 2D. It's going to go in the order of 2D. I'm going to talk about 2D a lot, live scopes, and then side and down imaging. I have used pretty much all forms of sonar we have today. Garmin Live Scope is really what I want to hit home today. And I've owned them all. Garmin, Lowrance, Simrad, Humminbird, each have their pros and cons. Like for example, Garmin, the lowest kilohertz you can get on a Garmin is 140, which is not going to give you as wide of a cone, which I'm going to get to here as well. But each one have their little quirks that make them either unique or not as effective. Most of the shots you're going to see here are going to be Lowrance, from a Lowrance 2D sonar and Garmin Live Scope. So this is the first thing I want to cover here, is if anybody isn't familiar with this, and a lot of people probably are, is this is your traditional 2D sonar cone, okay? You have the more kilohertz that you put out, the narrower the beam's going to be. It's going to be more definitive, and there are applications for that. Let's say you're going into the back of a creek and you're looking for bait. You want to know when that bait is right under your boat, not somewhere in this cone here. Off of here, you're going to throw your net right under the boat. You probably want to be running 200 kilohertz to be able to see when the bait's right under you. Versus 83 gives you a wider. So you're going to see more with 83. You're going to mark more fish. Personally, I don't know why you wouldn't go with a lower kilohertz setting. Yeah,
Are those adjustable, or is it by one or the other?
Each sonar has its own, and it's not, this is, Lowrance is usually 283. Garmin, like I said, only goes down to 140.
But can you switch like a different mode?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. All of them will have options where you can go to a higher frequency or a lower frequency. And each have their advantages, like I said, but, yeah, go ahead.
Is the machine or the transducer that you're changing?
You're changing what the transducers, the signal it's sending out. And you're changing that on the scene, so you on the screen. So your screen's talking to your transducer and telling it the amount of kilohertz to send out. Go ahead.
So I've used Lowrance and I've used Garmin.
Yeah.
The Lowrance, to me, is easier because it gives you the 83 or the 200. Those are the two options.
Which are the classic.
Now,
Yeah.
my Garmin, it has a whole list, but it doesn't, I don't think it goes by kilohertz, I think it goes by cone angle, it's like
Yeah.
13, 14, 15, 16, you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to remember it, but I don't remember just the simple 83 and 200
On a Garmin?
on the Garmin. I think the Garmin gives you several different options, and I've had to really play with that.
Like it'll say wide or
Right.
narrow.
Right.
It doesn't give you like a degree angle.
No, it
I
gives you a degree
the
angle.
rants better, to
Okay.
be honest with you.
See, but my Garmin's got 277, they're preset, and that's all I can do. I can either
Okay.
do 200 or 77.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, well, it's normally, just traditionally, it's gonna be a high like 200 and a low of like, it's somewhere in the 70, 80 degree range. Some will get you as low as 50, which is a super wide cone, but it's not definitive at all. It's hard to tell a lot on a 50 kilohertz signal. But anything else we can talk about here? Any other questions on the sonar, on the beam angle here?
I thought I read in mine, that the circle is equal to the depth. So if you're in
What do you
60 feet of water, you got a 60-foot diameter.
It's gonna change with each, the diameter's gonna change with each kilohertz signal that you shoot down.
Right, I understand that now.
So you're saying, the depth of the water is how wide you're,
Yeah.
okay, I've never heard that, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's
So that
absolutely.
goes to what I was talking about on the Garmin. Like on my Garmin, if I choose 20%, so let's say I'm in 60 feet of water, the picture it's giving me is 20% of the depth.
Okay.
So that would be what?
12 feet.
1/5 of 60, so that'd be about a 12-foot circle, right?
So it's an aspect ratio on the
Yes.
display that's been seen, not, it doesn't change the electronics capability of the cone.
Now, so
That cone is set by what he's telling you. Your aspect ratio is the screen, so if you're in 60 foot of water, it's this wide, 20% is this much, it's trying to display it within that. That's my understanding. Yeah, are we right or are we wrong?
Yeah, that, yes.
The deeper the water, the wider the signal, because it's
Correct.
coming at a cone.
Correct, absolutely, yeah.
But it's still in the aspect ratio of the.
But still, even if you're seeing fish at 20 feet, whether it's the bottom is 20 feet or there's fish at 20 feet, you're still gonna get the same cone angle at 20 feet. If that makes sense.
That's right. Yeah, you can go. Garmin has a transducer buying guide that will allow you to put in the feet of depth, and it will tell you how big the cone is.
Oh,
Yeah,
it does the math for you.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. It's a combined Garmin Airmar document. You can find it on the web.
So this is just basically the same picture as before, narrow, wide. Wide, you're gonna see more, water below you, narrow, it's gonna be a little bit more definitive, but you're not gonna be able to see as much. All right, we're gonna watch, I'm gonna show a video here.
Who's more excited?
He's stuck right in there now.
Oh yeah, swamp monkey jig head right there. All right, so this is, I'm gonna talk about this, I wanna hit this home with you as well. This is how your arch pops up on your screen. A lot of people, a big question in sonar today is why is it an arch? Why does a fish show up as an arch? And if a fish is just sitting under you, it's not going to be an arch. The fish coming in and out of the screen is gonna come in on this side, or whichever way it comes in. The outside of the cone is a half power point. The farther you get towards the edge of the cone, there's gonna be less power coming from your transducer. The middle is the peak power point. That's why you always see in your fish marks, the middle is the yellow. That's the highest density. That's when the fish is gonna come in, it's gonna reach highest density right here, and then it'll taper off again. Fish will only show up as arches if you're moving or if they are moving, because they're coming in and going out of the sonar cone. If you're on spaghetti, you wanna be on spaghetti. You wanna be on wavy lines just right under you. Those are fish that are not moving. Either you're going with them, which is a very rare scenario, or they're sitting under you. And so I'll show this short video here.
So the color that's displayed on your screen is not bottom densities and such?
What do you mean?
Like, I thought like a red would be a hard bottom and the.
Yeah, it depends what color palette you have.
Okay.
But like, for most people, yellow, the highest yellow is gonna be your highest density.
Okay.
And then red and blue is gonna be your lower density. But this is, I'll show you the video on this one. So you can see here's your screen up here. Then you get the densest part of the mark, and then it goes out of the screen. And now if a fish comes only in, let's say a fish only comes in on the outside part of the cone here, you're not getting into the strong power point here. So your signal is going to be much weaker. You're still going to get an arch of the fish coming in and going out of the cone, but it's not going to be as strong because it's not reaching that peak power point, if that makes sense.
Can you do that one more time?
Yeah. And so in this case, the boat's moving forward, and the fish, they're giving an example of the fish sitting still. But there's all sorts of different scenarios. If you're moving and the fish is moving, it's going to be even shorter of a mark. All right, I'll show another short video here.
The first point of interest is this fish just entering the 50 kilohertz wide cone here. You'll see him just starting to appear on the sonar on the right hand side on your 2D sonar, but you won't see him in the downscan yet because he hasn't actually entered that beam yet. The next fish we're talking about is the one on the opposite side that is just entering the 50 kilohertz beam. You won't see the tail of the echo because it's hiding behind the first fish. Only now will you start to see it appear in the 2D sonar view. But you'll also now start to see the first fish in the same view, but now past the top of the arch because he's past the center of the cone. And that same fish has now appeared in the downscan because he's just past the downscan beam. This next fish we're talking about now, you will never even know it was there because you won't see it on the sonar. The reason being he's so far out from the center of the cone in the 50 kilohertz range is that it's actually made him further away from the transducer than the actual bottom. And therefore he'll actually be hidden in the bottom itself. This fourth fish to enter our coverage area is also just in the outer edge of the 50 kilohertz and is a very weak signal in our 2D sonar. But the second fish that passed through our beam is now very strong on both 2D and downscan. The reason for this is that it passed through the center part of our cone, giving a very strong return. The last fish we're looking at is our first fish, just getting to the weaker edge of our coverage area as we move on and we move away from these four fish, of which only 3 are visible on our sonar.
So you can see there how this fish right here that went right in the middle of the sonar cone got right in that peak power point, gave you the highest density mark. And the ones that weren't directly under gave you a lower density mark right there. Most color palettes, the higher density is going to be yellow, I believe. Lawrence says yellow. You can change your color palette to whatever you want. And then another thing over here on down imaging. Down imaging is just 2D sonar shot at a super high frequency. So it's super descriptive. And this is more likely to show you an actual picture of a fish. Look, it's very rare for that to happen. You'd have to have a perfect passover of that fish. But this is going to be much more descriptive. And that goes with, like with what I was saying earlier. With the higher kilohertz, the more descriptive of a mark you're going to get.
Okay, so Wes, this is happening in rather rapid time sequence on the boat.
Right.
Now, how do you fish that?
Well, as you can see,
I've never casted into a Lorad for a...
This is current right here. This is your current, this is right under you. This is history. This is behind you. So in this situation, it depends if you're either moving forward. In this situation, it looked like the boat was moving forward and you were running over fish. And so in that situation, you could turn back over and maybe drop a waypoint. A lot of fish finders you can cursor to and drop a waypoint right where you saw those fish. Now those fish probably, good chance they'll move out of that area, but you'll know where they were when you ran over them. That's the biggest thing I would say is use your cursor to and make a waypoint right on that.
Okay, but this is happening in real time. We all know the fish are moving. How are you going to literally fish that? What are you going to do with your rod and everything else?
Well, that's a whole, it depends, like,
Guide secrets.
Oh, gosh, the depth of the water, time of year, where I am, not like that, but if this was a scenario, exactly this scenario, I'm in 25 feet of water and there's 3 fish popping up right there. That's a pretty shallow area, there's no trees on the screen. You can probably pull bait through there, you can drop a jig on them in the winter. Fish are more prone to hit a jig in the winter.
But which way are the fish traveling? You have no
You
clue.
cannot tell on 2D sonar where they're going.
Okay.
No way to tell on 2D sonar.
Now, how does chart speed enter into this?
How fast the chart is moving?
Yeah.
Well, the faster your chart is moving, the bigger of a mark you're gonna get. So that really is irrelevant to where the fish are.
It's just gonna make the arch bigger.
Yeah, it's just gonna make it bigger.
So you think you got a 40-pound fish, but it's only 10 pounds.
Right. Which would help your ego if you make it.
So you should match your scroll rate with the rate of travel of the boat.
That's the closest you wanna be to. Alright, now we're gonna get into some images here. Alright, so I'm gonna describe the images as well. You guys ask any questions on these. We're gonna go through a lot of images here. This is, we got 2 schools of separated fish here. I believe this is a down line here, and then you got a jig right here. Someone's jigging down here at 50. I yelled at my client to reel it up. He came up here. Looks like he ended up right here. And then you got another jig dropping down right here. After I said the fish finder's lit up, we had another jig dropping down right here. But these are pretty mobile fish. I believe in this situation we were sitting still. If you're sitting still and they look like that, they're moving pretty quick. And Garmin Live Scope really will tell you exactly how fast they're moving. I'm going to get into that here, but just based on a 2D sonar stance, these are fast-moving fish. If the boat was moving and they looked like this, it's really hard to tell whether they're moving or not, but you definitely ran over them quick enough to make a nice arch.
So the line at 110 degrees is actually a fishing line?
This right here?
Yes.
This is a line.
And you said the ones underneath are?
These are jigs, you can see them going up and down. We're jigging them.
That's the same one?
No, this
Okay,
is
it's
a,
Minnia, okay.
He's holding it.
this is a different line up here, and this is a jig. Somebody physically moving a jig up and down and making that mark go up
I
and
would
down.
expect to see it go straight up.
And then this is somebody dropping a jig right here into them. And you got some structure down here on the bottom. This is not the bottom, this is structure down here. I think this is the same picture, just expanded. So you kept jigging and you had another school of fish coming in right here. Again, moving pretty quick, just like how I said earlier, the middle is gonna be the yellow. You're gonna have the red and blue taper off to make that arch. But here the jig going through right here, had some fish interested. A lot of people think this right here is fish coming deep, coming up, looking at your line and going down. That's not what it is. This fish was here the entire time. These fish were here the entire time. When you ran over them, you created that arch, which made it look like they were actually coming up deeper, looking at your line and going down. Doesn't mean that can't happen, doesn't mean you can't mark that on sonar, but that's a common misconception when someone sees an arch, is that that fish is coming up and looking at your line.
Now you just broke my heart.
How you would know, how you would know if that fish was actually coming up, moving up in the water column, is if it was yellow the entire time.
Yeah.
That's how you would know. Here, I'm gonna scroll through these here after I make some major points. Here's some pretty mobile fish here too. You got one not mobile fish right here. And you like to see a screen full of those, but this is a fish that's been under us for a while. It started to taper off right here. You got a jig dropping down right here. Stopped right here and started jigging again.
So you were in time with that fish? The
What-
fish was underneath the boat with you? You were in
Yeah,
time with it?
this fish was underneath the boat with us.
That one long line?
Yeah, that one, and then you got some structure, well, this looks like bait down here a little bit, but it looks like structure over here.
There looks to be one fish down there in the bay, bottom right. You see it?
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, turn your sensitivity up, you'll be able to tell a little bit better, but yeah, it might be. Here's a blackout.
Wow.
And, this is really obviously what you wanna see here, but these fish, are a little bit slower than the fish that I had showed earlier. A little bit longer of a mark. You got fish from the bottom all the way up to, looks like 15 feet. This screen's, picture's a little crooked.
How many fish would you guess that is?
Just in the, you gotta take into account that this is just what the sonar cone is showing, not actually how many are in that school. But just on the picture here, this is just, you can't read this right here, obviously. But just looking at the amount, I'd say, 200 fish, somewhere in that ballpark. And the amount of fish, this amazes my clients a lot too, the amount of fish that will not eat, have no interest in eating in that school will be extraordinary. I'd say 80% will not eat. But you'll still have chaos just because of the sheer amount of fish that are there. But most of those fish are probably not going to eat, but there will be situations, times in which they, a lot more fish will want to eat, low pressure systems, stuff like that. But these fish are still mobile. You can tell in the mark that they're mobile, but not moving as fast.
So you wouldn't fish that?
Oh, yeah.
That's in your own.
Those fish will not.
You only one stupid one.
So what's accounting for that 40 feet of rise in the arch?
That's how slow you're going over this fish, and how weak that power point is coming in, especially if it's coming directly into that cone. It's going to create more of an obnoxious mark, if that makes sense.
So it's making a wrong estimate based on the power because it's a weaker power. Once
Right.
you get into the stronger power, it becomes more precise. So the higher end of the arch is what you're saying.
So the higher
The
end of
more
the arch
yellow?
is where the fish really is.
That's where the fish is. That's
Where
if
the yellow is.
you have red and blue coming up, that's not your fish. Until you hit that yellow, that's where it is.
The top of the yellow.
Yes, that's the depth where your fish is.
But if it's blue and red the whole time, that's not
That means-
necessarily the top.
No, but where the highest dense it is, and where that arch peaks is where it is, but that fish is probably not right under you. It's somewhere in your cone, but not right under you, so
I
you're not
got you.
getting a great mark.
You said when you see this, there would be chaos. Are you talking about with the fish or your clients?
Yes, yes. There'll be a video.
Sorry.
You'll hear his high-pitched,
Real.
yeah, demands here in just a second.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I gotta cut this out over here. This is, you can see, actually, I think this is where I came off plane. There's a lot of fuzz here, and I came off plane. This is a great way to come off plane right here. These are a little bit longer marks, not as mobile. I can tell I was going faster because these are much sharper arcs here. I think I did come off plane right here.
How fast can you go and accurately pick up?
Well, at Smith Mountain Lake, we have a lot of debris, so I do not like to read at speed and have my transducer in the water while I'm moving, just for the sheer fact of the debris that I'm gonna hit, going up river or whatever, hitting logs, it'll wipe a transducer out if you wanna read at speed. That is an advantage though. If you do wanna read at speed, you will be able to see. It's gonna be a lot more difficult. You can go probably up to 25 miles an hour and still read your fish finder. But if you do that, you are risking your transducer getting hit by, any floating debris. So when your boat comes off plane, it sits down in the water versus when it's skimming on top of the water. So if you just put your transducer right above the bottom of your boat, then when you get off plane, it'll be in the water and not when you're on plane. So
Where do you have your transducers mounted in your boat?
they're all at the transom,
Through holes or transom mounted?
all transom mounted, yeah. But through hole does give you that advantage, of being able to read speed without not having to worry to hit anything. Here's a little bit better, of not mobile fish. This is more what you're looking for, spaghetti marks. This isn't as good, but this right here, these are not mobile fish. You can see any difference from the actual traditional arc, like this right here, that's a fish moving up. You have something going on right there. Chad was talking about this the other day. There's another picture that shows this as well. But these are pretty non-mobile fish right here. And that's really what you're looking for is those spaghetti marks. Here's very mobile fish. And you can see we're not moving. This is not a situation in which I'm moving. If we're dropping a jig right here, we're jigging. What probably happened here is I marked them on live scope, saw them, and I said, boys, let's get the jigs out. We drop the jigs down, we run right over them, and they're just moving at an insane speed. This is a very fast-moving school of fish right here. You get some debris down here.
And it's just because the arch is so tight, it's not laid out.
Right.
And when you say that, when you say they're moving at an insane speed, give them, and this is just from my experience, if your jig is not in the water and you're having to wait about 10 or 12 seconds to get that jig down, they're gone.
Yeah.
You might have about 3 seconds of a shot at those fish,
And
right?
You can see here, there was no interest whatsoever. There was no difference. Maybe this right here, you got a little bit of a difference right here. But the majority of these fish just kept going. Got out of the sonar cone and kept going. And so that can help you as well when it comes to information on how the fish are acting that day. Looks like you got one down here, but this is mostly debris here. And then a few popping up right here. But that's really what you want to see is not just a traditional arc, more of a wavy line.
So how can you determine between debris and a fish that's on the
Debris is
outside
uniform.
edge of the cone?
Debris is completely uniform. There's not going to be, it does take a trained eye. The trained eye really helps with seeing debris. I mean, I can point it out anywhere. But debris is going to be much more uniform. Traditionally, unless you run right over a tree, which is very rare, the actual main limb of that tree, it's mostly going to be red or blue. Trees are, the main thing, trees are very uniform. In these fish, they're not connected, not being connected to the bottom is another big thing as well.
Any relationship from red to blue?
That's your lower density, so you're not in the middle of the cone right here. Your yellow, these fish were right underneath. This is a newer Lowrance. On one of my older boats, I had a newer Lowrance version. These are a little bit crisper arches. I do love the old Lowrances, the pictures that they put off, and I think those are very user friendly. But these again are very fast moving fish. Boat was sitting still in this position. You got something going on right here. Fish not moving, but for the majority of this school, mostly mobile fish here.
What frequency?
This would be 83. Pretty much all the shots that you'll see, all of them will be 83. Here's another blackout. This one we were ready for. These are down lines right here. These are our down lines. So we went right into these fish. I do have a video of this altercation later.
Altercation.
I do have a video of this whole thing later, which I'll show you in a minute here. But like Gilmore pointed this out yesterday here, this is a fish doing something completely different from just moving. This is a extra movement that you can pick up that's not just an arch. These fish were moving at a pretty slow pace, but any difference in an arch is going to show you a fish doing something different than just moving forward.
When you say different, what's it mean?
Well, just from you running over them and then sitting in the same position. Maybe they'll come up, maybe they'll go left or right, and make it'll differ. It'll make that arc differ, go up or down.
That's what that sharp V is in your report.
Right.
Okay.
You had a fish that came up there instead of just moving forward. This is an interesting shot here. Okay. This is actually, if you can't tell, this is a catch and release. There was a catch and release in this sonar shot that you can see. Right here, a fish was hooked. I think Gilmore, I think this is your fish. I think you were on the boat this day.
Oh, yeah.
But these are fish that are not as mobile, are moving, but you do have flatter lines. But a fish was hooked right here on a jig. Gilmore only fishes jigs, so it had to be a jig. But he caught it here, went up, and then he released it right here. So that's a whole catch and release within a sonar shot.
It also looks like several fish, once the fish was hooked, it looks like several
Yeah.
fish came up with them
Yes.
a little bit, not very
Yes.
far, but some.
And that's another thing that is very common. When a striper eats, they want to eat it out of each other's mouth. And you will see a lot, maybe the next owner, no, next owner shot won't show. But a lot of these fish, there was a screenshot I took of this same school of fish just after that I didn't put in here, if you remember. Fish following the fish that was hooked all the way up to like 15 feet. So that's common practice when you hook a striper. And I think I do have some videos of that on LiveScope. And now we're going to get into LiveScope. LiveScope is a beam. It is a beam, but it is shooting at a super high frequency that is completely live, a ridiculous frequency that's like watching a TV. This is down view. Garmin has multiple different views that you can use. There's a forward view, which I think this is forward view, where you can just look forward and your cone does not go down. It actually is just a straight beam out. And so you can look out, but you cannot see behind you. But anywhere in front of you, that's called forward view. And then what I use is down view, so you can see behind and in front of you. But like on forward view, you can point and see your trolling motor in front of you. And so both have their advantages and pros and cons. But forward view would be really good for like running up on a point. You want to look up a point. Down view is just traditionally what I use all the time because I think it's enough that I can see in front and behind. I think it gives me more eyes down there.
And you still use your transom mount with the LiveScope?
No, so most LiveScope transducers are mounted on a trolling motor because you can move it to face in any direction because it's looking out, right? So you can move it to face in any direction, and you know the one independent wireless rotation thing on a boat is a trolling motor. So a lot of people put it on their trolling motor. I do not put it on a trolling motor. I have a side mount here on the side. This is called a turnscope. There's Gilmore's head. This rotates independently with a remote controller that I have. The reason I do not put it on a trolling motor is because you're dependent on where you're steering, where you're looking. So I like to be independent from the trolling motor, and so I have a separate mount up there that controls it, and I have a remote that just connects to my trolling motor remote around my neck, that I can independently move that.
You just pull that up when you're running?
Yeah, you just pull that up when you're running, drop it in when you get off plane. You can look 360 degrees in any direction.
How is that for finding bait? That would be perfect for finding bait.
Beautiful. And I'll show some videos towards the end of bait catching, but I feel bad kind of for the guys who don't have it and are still trying to catch bait, especially at 2 in the morning. When I'm out there and I get back at 3 o'clock, I'm back in my bed at 3 o'clock. Specifically Travis baits with cats and strippers. He will not buy a Garmin LiveScope. I can't get him to buy it. I've been using this for 30 years. Here's a video. This is an interesting video. Here's a video of me swimming.
And before he plays that, John, are you good on time? Are you good on, do you need a break to?
Nope, this is good.
Separate the
Yep,
flow? Okay.
just live
Everybody
streaming.
good?
Yep.
Okay.
This is a forward imaging. The transducer's in forward view. This is a video of me swimming.
It's like a manatee.
Oh my God. Oh, wow.
So you can imagine.
Was that your echo underneath?
What? What do you mean?
The water.
There's
Yeah,
a
the
shadow,
red
there's a
image.
shadow on the bottom. Check it out. Yeah.
Looks like it's a harmonic or something.
Right there,
Oh,
right there.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Double echo.
This is Guardian Angel.
But you can imagine, a fish coming in there and being able to see the full detail and being able to use these lines here. You've got 0 to 5 feet. And if a fish takes up this much space, it's 3 feet long. And so it's just amazing, especially in shallow water. In deep water, you're not going to see the fins, you're not going to see that detail. And once you get into super shallow water, you see some incredible detail. Here's a good video. Here's some chaos.
Oh, wow. All that, right?
Those are all stripers.
Wow. Wow.
You got one up there, front right.
Back right.
They're schooling fish. This is just insane.
So you've never seen
Right, got another one right here.
this one?
Got another one back here.
Must be the altercation.
Oh my goodness. You got another one, front left. You're everywhere. That's okay, you got one back left. Because that one came off. My goodness. Look at that school fish.
So the real advantage of live scope is, once they're under you, your 2D sonar is going to tell you everything you need. But being able to look 20, 40, 60, 80 feet in front of you, and in this certain situation, I point at these fish, and I see that they're coming right at me. I think you can see here at the beginning of the video. You can see these fish are coming right at me.
They're all
So I know that I can sit still and let those fish continue to come at me. And so we just sat still right there and wore them out. But another thing I want to say is no matter how many blackout fish finder screens I get, I sound like a little girl every single time. That's it. My clients think they're my first client or something every time I take them out because I freak out every time the fish finder blacks out. But that's the real advantage of Garmin Live Scope. Being able to see in any direction. I'm looking 60 feet in front of me here, and you can see that I wouldn't be able to see to 80 because that's where the cone angle kind of shuts off. But 60 is, that's an amazing. But if you did have forward view, you'd be able to see much farther out. But because I have down view, I can see in front and behind me, so I can see where those fish go after they go behind me. And I think that's why I think that is really useful.
How do you know they're coming at you again?
I have my my transducer pointed at where I found these fish. I scanned, I found them, and I could tell that they were coming closer to the transducer.
Because they go from the 60 mark to the 40 mark to the 30 mark.
Right.
You see that.
Right. And if you see fish pop up out of nowhere, if you're pointing in a certain area and you see fish just pop up at 40 feet, that means they came in from the left or right, not straight at you in the sonar. So this is the real advantage here, is being able to say, let's go that way. You can see those fish 50, 60 feet right above bottom.
Here they come.
Did you decide because 80% of them don't bite, you just go on to the next school?
But that's the real advantage, seeing them coming at you and being able to know where you need to go.
Look at that.
They're all over the bait right now. They're moving. They've got it.
Down line right here, they're in the down line. Got more fish coming in. Higher in the water column. So that was your down line right there. I don't know if you saw it. Pretty quick. Right here. There's a weight and then there's a bait swimming around and you'll probably see it.
Look at that.
They're all over the bait right now.
You see it coming
They're
up
moving.
right there.
They've got to hit one of those.
What kind of bait do you use?
Allied blueback herring, mostly, majority of the year. Certain times of the year, we'll pick up some gizzard shad, but allied and blueback herring.
He's a big thread fin fan too.
Oh, yeah, I love thread.
I have a question. How big's your screen there?
This is I believe this is a 9-inch.
So you can see it good on a 9-inch screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
But if I had like a 10 or 12, I'd be able to run sonar and live scope on the same one, which would be nice.
Right.
But 9-inch is perfect for me, to be able to see just fine enough.
That's because your eyes aren't 60 years old.
Yet.
Yet.
Does your Lowrance and your Garmin interfere with one another?
No, my Garmin was very good about protecting the kilohertz that they give out on their live scope to not interfere with other transducers. So they did a really good job with that. I get no interference with my sonar at all. The biggest thing I get, which a lot of you probably are familiar with, is trolling motor interference. Whenever you turn that trolling motor on, you get interference. That's difficult, but the live scope, I've had no problems with it.
So you shut your trolling motor off at that point right there?
I think so, but really, the trolling motor interference is really big on side imaging for some reason. With 2D sonar, I don't get any interference with my trolling motor. Some people may, but mostly with down imaging and side imaging with that super high frequency, you get that interference. So I think we've been sitting on some fish for a while here. We got some more fish coming in front of us. These are your lines going straight across the screen right here.
Got one right here, right side. They are full loaded down there.
Not as mobile, kind of looks like spaghetti a little bit more, and you can see they're not moving that quick on your live scope. Fish everywhere from 20 feet down to 60. I believe this is Becky's.
Front left, front left, front left.
Yeah, there's a house, condos right here to the left. This is, your go-to August, July, August time, when it's ready. There's the island right there.
Are you on Blackwater?
No, Becky's in Betty's, just below the bridge, on the north side. Really good, go-to July, August, been that way for as long as I can remember. They got fish all over the column here.
What time of the day are you at these spots? Is this early in the morning? or
Joe
late in
wants
the
to know
evening?
what time
What
to meet
time?
you there.
Well,
Do you have some bait to share?
yeah, all my charters run in the morning, so all these shots come from the morning time. Your more activities are gonna be your dusk and dawn. That's just striper are big on feeding windows, and that's why a lot of times when you hit them, they won't eat, because they're all big on feeding windows. And that shows like when a striper blitz happens, they're all eating at once. And so it's like they're either all eating or only like a very small fraction of them want to.
Are you jigging or trolling on that?
On this video right here,
No, the last one. Where
this video, these were down lines right here.
As you're looking at that screen there, we go back to the last one, you have a 0 in the middle, so anything on the right side of that is out to the right.
That's anywhere
Left side.
so wherever my arrow's pointing, this is the front half.
Right.
So this is what's looking in front, and this is what's behind, and then the closer it's getting to zeros, the closer it's getting to you. So wherever my arrow's pointing, that's the front, this is the back. And again, I can change that 360 degrees and look in any direction.
That's a $2,500 machine.
$1,500 for the actual transducer, but to be able to have a compatible unit with it, a Garmin unit, you're probably looking at like $3,500. But if you already have a compatible Garmin unit, it's only $1,500 just for the transducer. Here's some stripers under bait at the surface. Very non-mobile fish, and this is at night. When stripers are the least mobile that they are, is going to be at nighttime. Well, this isn't at night. This is in the morning. This is at like 3 in the morning. But you got bait here at the surface. This was off of a light. I remember there was bait at the surface, and there were fish under it. All this down here, very non-mobile fish. Here's a bunch of thread fins at the surface here. And this was right before the thread fins died last year in February. Their last resort was to come up to the surface to get any sunlight warmth that they could. The whole water column was too cold for them. So they fled to the surface. You remember last year, February Bulldog, there were schools of thread fins up at the surface. You could throw a jig in and foul hook them. They were all up at the surface. And I believe birds indicated to me to these fish right here. They are feeding on this thread fin school up here. Again, this is right before they started dying. Thread fin came to the
Regular
surface.
sonar versus live scope.
You can see them coming up a little bit here.
How bad was the dying?
What we're seeing this year is that the amount of thread fins we're seeing this year really tells us that last year wasn't as bad as we thought. We're still loaded with thread fins, and that's making fishing right now really tough. The thread fin problem is really what's making fishing tough right now. Fish have no incentive to go up on a bank and chase a gizzard shad. The gizzard shad bite has been really slow this year. The striper mafia saw the worst weights they have in years. Fish, there's just so much bait deep, there's no incentive for fish to come up shallow and chase a gizzard shad.
What's that the name of that new species or whatever?
Bluebacks? Bluebacks are new, yes. Bluebacks are just recently new. We have a good population of bluebacks now. Threadfins have been here for a while. Right now, that's the issue, is the threadfin. Although the bluebacks are probably changing the way these fish act, but the threadfins are ruining it with the amount that we have in here.
Just because there's so much bait?
Yeah, let me show you a picture here. This is a picture, just a recent picture here. Here's the striper that's being filleted here. As you can see, it's full of threadfins. This is what gives you hope right here, is a bait that, you'd be able to get on a hook. So there was still motivation to eat that, but it's full of threadfins. We're loaded with threadfins right here. At Smith Mountain Lake right
They
now.
were introduced and they just are so
I don't know how they got in here. I don't know the history. Anybody know? Gilmore, you know the history of how threadfins got in here?
How long have they been here?
I have no idea how long they've been here. They've been here ever since I've been here. Right now, it's the worst population I've seen of them, period. Right now, you're gonna mark a ton of fish. I think the population of striper in the lake right now is great. I think the biologists have done a great job with the amount of fish that we have. We have more fish than we used to. We're marking a ton of fish that will not eat.
Because they're full?
Right. This is their belly right here. And that makes it even, how I was saying earlier, most of your fish in a blackout fish finder will not eat. Now it's like all of them will. It's been really tough. The amount of fish that we've seen to the amount of fish that we've caught is pretty ridiculous. Now, you can't just go in and throw 1 million stripers in here and say, let them go to town. Because these threadfins, you don't know each winter how bad the threadfin kill is gonna be. You may have no threadfin kill, you may get rid of them all.
Water temperature kills them?
Right, they're very warm water bait fish. Last year we got in 41, 42, and they started dying, and that's when you had all those seagulls come in and started going crazy, seagulls everywhere. They were just eating these threadfins. And you cannot fish during a threadfin kill off. Striper will sit on the bottom with their mouth open, that's all they have to do. Threadfin will fall into their mouth. It's extremely hard to fish during a threadfin kill. It's hard to fish just with an overpopulation of threadfin shad. But with a threadfin kill, it's even worse because there's no work that they have to do to eat.
How about the blueback population? When did you start seeing them and how?
Well, I think bluebacks were 6 or 7 years ago when we started seeing the first ones. And they showed up upriver first, and now they're everywhere. They promoted deep water bite. Bass fishermen hate them because it changes everything.
Wait a minute. Some bass fishermen like them.
Well,
It gives us bass fishermen that aren't that good an equal opportunity to catch a good bass, because I'm not fishing the same bass that the real good
bluebacks,
fish.
more than any other bait fish, are full of protein. It's like drinking a protein shake after you work out. And so bluebacks are going to give you bigger fish. They're going to give you healthier fish. But we have a very strong population of bluebacks now. It's not overpopulated.
How do we tell the difference between an owleye and a blueback?
I have a picture on my phone. They look very similar. They do look very similar. Bluebacks are a little hardier. Owleyes, I can tell just by looking at them. Owleyes are a little bit more circular, kind of similar to a threadfin, and a blueback is long and skinny.
Okay.
Bluebacks will keep their scale on them more easily. Trying to think of any other giveaways. Both have the black dot behind their.
There's a distinguishing internal feature.
Yes, if you cut them open, you can tell for sure. But a big owleye and a blueback are very hard to
If
tell.
you look in your bait well and you pick out, would you pick out an owleye or a blueback to put on a hook?
Well, it depends what the situation is. But,
I think you gotta cut it open first to see.
I can tell, holding them what they look like in a bait tank, I can tell the difference, but I think it takes some time to really, notice the differences.
One's not a better bait as far as.
Bluebacks have more protein.
Bluebacks are harder to catch in the tank. If you go to try to scoop bait out, the bluebacks seem to dart, and they seem to be a little harder to
Bluebacks
catch.
get much bigger than owleyes do.
Okay.
And this year especially, we've seen some giant bluebacks, almost look like baby skipjack herring. Which tells us, those females are really starting to.
Yeah, I've caught some.
Don't they like the colder water too?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, they're a deep water bait fish, and so they promote a deeper bite, and that's what bluebacks change the fishing. Like I said, in the threadfins right now are ruining it. And thread fins right now are deeper because that's where your warmer water is deeper. But if they do have a kill off, the chronological order, thread fins will come to the surface looking for sunlight and warmth, and then they'll go in creeks to die. That's their last resort, is creeks. That's where creeks are the first to cool and the first to warm. Like as you notice right now, if you paid attention to the water temperatures, all the way upriver is like 39, 40 degrees. At the bridge, it's 49, 50. And so that actually pushes fish out of the river system back down into the main lake, because they're cool water fish, they're not a cold water fish. So that cold water will push them out of the river system. But those thread fins, very intolerant of cold water. In fact, even now, they're hard to keep in a bait tank, because if you stress them out even just a little more, they're a lot harder to keep alive, because they're already stressed out because of the cold water. Right around, once you get into the 40s, they start freaking out a little bit, and then low 40s, they start dying. So, we get this picture off the screen. But right now they're deep, because so when the water turns over in the fall, that's where your warm water from the summer is now at 40, 50 feet below, if that makes sense.
Have you seen it turn over yet?
Oh yeah, it usually turns over late October, early November. The actual turnover process that gives you a coffee colored water and low oxygen levels only happens all the way upriver. A lot of people think that happens over the entire lake and it pushes down the river as it goes down. It usually starts all the way upriver and makes its way to the trestles, and then it stops. Now the actual process of water turning over happens all over the lake, but the phenomenon where it's so fast that the oxygen levels can't sustain itself, and you get that coffee colored water, only happens upriver. But the whole lake does turn over, and your warm water from the summer gets cooled. It falls under the water that's below it because it gets colder than that water, and that water comes up to the top, gets cooled even more by winter, cold winter temperatures, and that water down there remains a little bit warmer, which is why your fish down there, why your bait's down there, why everything's down there 40, 50 feet.
And so what happened last year is we had that prolonged cold, and water is its densest at 39 degrees. So if you guys remember last year, the surface temperature for pretty much mid-January through the end of February, the surface temperature was at 40 degrees. So if you think about the 40 is obviously right there beside 39, so that's the densest water that you can possibly have on this lake. So that water every day, it cooled at night, so it would fall. It would cool at night, and it would fall. It would cool at night. So you just had cooling water falling through the water column. So eventually those thread fins had no warm refuge at all in the water column. It was a uniform 40 degrees from surface to near the bottom. They just did not have anywhere to go to seek refuge. So that's why they died. Sometimes, like 10, 15 years ago, we had a really hard, cold, I want to say it was like the 1st of December, maybe, whatever. We had a really hard, cold freeze like we did, like we're having today, but it lasted for about a week and a half. That killed the thread fins. They couldn't get down fast enough to get away from the cold water, and the cold water got them. So there are two different ways that the thread fins can die. It's an immediate 5-degree temperature change, boom, they're going to die. Or if the water temperature, they just can't find something warmer than 40 degrees, they're going to die.
Yeah.
So cold snap gonna change the fishing?
We'll find out tonight. Whoever got it.
Relative to surface temperature, compare the surface temperature, like if it's 40 degrees, what is it 50 feet?
Last week we were, last week when we had that warm surge, we were in the 70s some days. Surface was, I think, like 50, 51, 40, 50 feet down. It was like 54, 55 degrees. So it's not much of a change, but it's enough to, and whenever the water warms up in December, your fish are gonna rise up to that warmer water. There's still warmer water down here, but with that warmer water, or that colder water getting warmed by that warm streak, those fish are gonna rise up. And so last week was a really strong gizzard shad bite, shallow upriver. Because rivers, creeks and, all the way upriver are the first to cool and first to warm. So those warmed up, fish fled upriver. Another thing with thread fins is fish aren't completely satisfied with thread fins that barely give off any protein. There still is motivation to get more protein in like a gizzard shad or a blueback. So you still have that motive. Do you have a question?
Is there an optimum temperature range then that they like to be in?
That striper or thread fins?
Well, both, actually.
Well, thread fins, anything above 50, they're fine. In the summer, they thrive, you know, they reproduce, I think.
Many
there's-
times a year.
Yeah, it's a constant, and that's why they're so hard to control. But anything above 50 is fine for thread fin. Striper, from what I've always said this, in different climates, people are gonna be more comfortable in different temperatures, like someone up in Alaska is gonna be more comfortable in 30 degrees than we are gonna be comfortable in 30 degrees. In my opinion, I think stripers in Smith Mountain Lake thrive at 60, 65 degrees. Whereas like a saltwater striper would thrive maybe 45, 50, yeah, a little bit colder. So I think different environments change that a little bit.
How are you getting the temperature deeper down? Because your equipment only measures
Joel
surface water.
The Smith Mountain Lake Fish Finder app has a temperature probe that's, I believe, 20 or 30 feet down.
And he has several locations on the lake, and he just signed up to be a sponsor, right?
That's right.
Is Nathan here tonight?
Yes,
Where are you?
right here.
There he is.
Yes, sir.
That's Nathan, Smith Mountain Lake Fish Finder, right there. Good
That
to
will
meet
tell you your temperature throughout the depths, and that's what it tells me over the last week, know that difference.
I have a question for you real quick.
Yeah.
So you're seeing and catching fish at 60 feet sometimes?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know of anywhere on the lake that I could get a sensor down that far and be in range of someone's Wi-Fi? And the reason I ask is because at Captain's Quarters, I have one 20 feet down, and I don't really know how much farther down I can get, even on his docks that are out there.
I have no idea.
Maybe we
That
talk,
sounds
maybe we
like
talk to
more.
somebody that is near one of the markers, like one of the channel markers. But typically those are only in like 20 or 30 feet, right?
Yeah, to get a buoy approved, would be like in the Act of Congress through. So that's what I thought about. Yeah.
How long are your batteries good for?
I can get years on batteries.
What is the depth of the bridge?
Well, that's where I've got one at 20 feet, but the thing is trying to find a place to set the sensor is the issue. So
What's the range?
It has a surface antenna, you put a buoy with an antenna up on it.
well, I haven't used any buoys yet. All these are either on floating or fixed docks.
Okay.
But I would like to be able to put a buoy out there because that way I could put something at the bridge, for example, and get much farther down, to be able to have the depth of water that I need to.
Why can't you just offload the bridge, foundation of the
One
bridge?
of the pillars.
Yeah.
I guess I would have to get that approved through VDOT. Well,
What's the range of your Wi-Fi?
it depends on the Wi-Fi network, so I don't mean to hijack, Weston's presentation, but I'm sorry, I just had that question about the depth, and maybe we can get one deeper than 20.
Yeah, it's 8:30 right now.
Okay, yeah, I'll finish up here. This is a short video here of your difference between live scope and regular. So these are
Regular sonar versus live scope.
I already showed this video. I'll skip through this. Here's some fish coming in behind me. That's a pretty good school right there. Here's that bumper in the background. I can't tell you whether,
Does it work or not?
Live scope made me believe more that it does not work. Just the way fish move. As you can see, these fish didn't stop at all after they heard a noise. They just kept going. And anybody who saw a screen like that light up while they were thumping, they never stopped thumping again. But I've had situations where I've thumped and I've caught fish, and I feel like it may have brought them in.
You still keep doing it though, don't you?
I do keep doing it.
It ain't broke.
Yeah. Here's fish coming in front.
You can tell which direction they're going.
Yeah, that's another thing, you can tell which direction they're going.
They pretty much travel in schools.
You will get some scattered fish here and there, but for the most part, it's mob mentality for them. They were able to eat much more effectively in numbers.
So, Weston, sorry, on your 2D,
Yeah.
you get a good hard return on your bottom there. On your live scope, what do you, is it that horizontal line that's through there that's just kind of a rough like your lower
So,
level arc down there right
You're
now?
talking about how the bottom moves on the live scope?
Well, yeah, and just the general, it looks like there's really no good hard return down below it that you see. Like in 2D, you're gonna see that solid high density all the way down and you see a good hard bottom.
Right.
You don't really see that on the live scope.
So you're saying
And like if you're in treetops, how do you distinguish, am I looking at bottom, am I looking at treetops above it? How do you distinguish on a live scope?
Well, really good shot here.
See, like right there, your horizontal line, is that your fixed bottom?
Yes, this is your fixed bottom.
Okay, but there's no real return below it showing, like you see in 2D.
Right. No, there's no second bottom that shows you. And second bottom will show you how hard your density is for your regular bottom. But no, there's no. There is some fuzz that goes on down here every once in a while, but it doesn't show you a hard line. The thing about live scope is, I'm sitting just by looking at this image, I'm sitting on a very flat terrain. I could be pointing in an area and the bottom's going like this, looking up a point or whatever.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
That's your tool for catching bait, your live scope?
Oh, yeah. Okay, here's the blackout earlier. That's what I showed you.
Another one right here.
So I have one client.
Got 2 on right here. Got 3.
That means Cappy gets to reel some in.
Look at that.
Y'all fish all the way 15 feet. Almost
We
in
got 'em
a
on
situation
everywhere.
that if there was bait on the surface, you think they would break.
We got 1 on right here.
I know you don't use hummingbirds, or you use that, or.
No, Hummingbird's probably the one I've had least experience with. 2D sonar, I know Hummingbird's just fine with 2D sonar, and they're really known for their side imaging, their mega side imaging especially. Hummingbird's very similar to Lowrance in a lot of ways. Nothing bad I can think of about Hummingbird. Here's a downline right here. I believe this is I think that's your weight right there, and that's your bait. You got a fish looking at it. I think you're gonna have a few fish come in here. You got one coming off bottom. Look, you saw that alewife coming up.
Munch.
Fight each other there. You know you have it once the weight moves. You know you're hooked up once that weight moves. That weight will take off. That's them coming up and looking at the bait. In that situation, you would think that they ate it. They're covering the mark, but they did not eat.
Scared your bait did that.
Yeah.
That is so frustrating.
Watch as this worm falls.
Alright, this is a perch
They're all
video. I'm
perch.
gonna drop a worm on these perch here.
Watch as this worm falls. That worm's going down.
There's my worm falling. Here
Look
they
him
go.
That's cheap. It's too easy.
They're all
Oh,
chasing,
my.
trying to get it out of its mouth. They're all messing it up.
Guys, that's why we fish for perch. They are ready eaters and they are delicious.
Great alternative.
Is that
Great
the COVID John's house?
You got it.
These are the white perch, right?
Yeah, here's the cast net video. I'm gonna speed up here since we're getting a little short on time.
Use a tape net?
Oh yeah, no other net will do that. No other net will stay open like that falling. No other net. You gotta be
Get
big.
out. Look at them all stuck in there.
Here we'll start freaking
Wow.
out. There's a lot of bait here. You got some better bait here at the surface. This looks like smaller stuff. There's some bigger stuff at the surface.
You catch bait every day, you put bait in tanks and keep them.
Every day I look fresh.
Two in the morning, 3 in the morning?
Yeah.
It's so good at cutting out the latitude and longitude.
Alright, here's a side imaging shot. I'm gonna be very brief on side imaging, so pretty short on time. This is, for a very short time I did have a hummingbird. And this is Hummingbird's mega side imaging. Here's a mark where you can see the actual fish's body. You can see its tail. And Humminbird side imaging is called mega imaging. They're shooting at a super high frequency, like 1,000 kilohertz per second, which would be called 1 megahertz. So they call it mega imaging. But that's a cool shot on side imaging. I'm going to be quick on this as well. The main thing I want to explain with side imaging is a lot of people think, I can go in a creek, I can go anywhere on this lake, and I can look 400 feet to the right or left of me and see everything I want to. But most of the time, especially in the summer, your fish are going to be right here. And so you're only going to see them when they're under you, and you'll be able to see which side of the boat they're on. If the fish are right above the bottom, that's when side imaging is useful. That's when you're going to see them on side imaging. Your side imaging, once the middle black part of the screen is this cone right here. It's a regular cone that'll tell you the right or left. And then your side, once you hit the bottom, is this cone on each side. And so you're only going to see them if your fish are above the bottom, right above the bottom. A great shallow water tool. But in the summer, a lot of people think I can just, ride down the middle of the lake and I'll see them on the right or left of me. But your fish are going to show up in this area, like I said. So that's one thing, one point I want to make on side imaging that a lot of people get confused about. Here's a very good shallow water image, 15 feet, got fish right above the bottom. I would turn the boat right here. That would be my personal preference.
So where are the actual fish in that?
Right here. You got them loaded right
All
here.
the straight lines?
All these straight
Okay.
individual marks. Another shallow water, 2 feet. You got fish on both sides here. Here's from the summer, one of the deep water screenshots, showing what's on the left and right. Each one of these dots is a fish. All these right here.
I've never caught that tree once.
Here's a bunch of fish showing up on side imaging as well. You can see where the middle cone caught them, and then a little bit of the side cone caught them. I think these fish were a little bit closer to the bottom. That's a Garmin side imaging. And that's it. I'll wrap it up there. Any more questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Do you use any custom settings on either your Lowrance or your Garmin, or you just use the auto defaults?
Auto defaults are really all they're going to set you up nicely. I like tweaking my sensitivity is the biggest thing.
But that would just be on the 2D, because I don't think the Garmin has much of a sensitivity. Or
No,
does it?
Garmin has gain.
Gain.
It really isn't much of a sensitivity. More of it makes everything brighter. More than anything. Sensitivity, yeah.
And one other question. On the 2D, do you use the standard puck or transducer, or do you use something more advanced like an Airmar?
No, I have the stock 83-200 kilohertz transducer from Lowrance, and I'm never going to switch.
Okay.
So that's my favorite. Gives me the best, simplest image. So, any other questions? Yeah.
What bait tank do you prefer?
I've had a creek bait. I've had them all. I've had Shad Shack. Shad Shack was known for leaks, so I got rid of Shad Shack. Mine never leaked. I got rid of it just out of being scared that it was going to leak. I had a Shad Shack. I had a creek bank for the majority of my guiding years. And creek bank did great. You cannot beat a super bait tank too. You can't beat its filtration. The welds are amazing. Best insulation. I think anybody who's ever been striper fishing long enough will tell you super bait tank 2 is just the top of the line. Creek bank's rotor molded, so you don't have to worry about welds in a creek bank. I could talk for 2 hours about bait tanks, so I'll shorten it up.
Next time.
Yeah.
All right.
Weston, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah,
thank you.
awesome. Thank you.